Trigger warning. The video quality is pretty poor, the audio quality is terrifying, and my content usually is very long because I unfold a lot of data, or not data numbers. I unfold a lot of facts, and then I narrow it down to get where I want, to get to the point. I need to first explain a little of the content for those who are not fully aware of everything. So, buyers beware. Also, I seem to have a Patreon. It seems to be a thing now. So, I'm going to e-beg here if you... I can't do that. In fact, one of the reasons that I don't do videos very often. I want to, believe me, I want to, because there's a lot of things to talk about, especially nowadays. However, other than the poor quality of the videos I make, at least in terms of audio and video, not of content, hopefully, is that I feel pretty ridiculous in talking here. However, one has to face it. Those are the times we're living, so this is the mean of communication currently. I cannot telegraph things anymore, and writing just takes too long time to do. This is the future, so, and I'm learning the skill, so if you happen to have any criticism to what I want to talk about, or to any quality of anything, positive, constructive criticism, how I should make them better, please do so right under. So Gavin McInnes, that for a long time I thought was written Gavin McInnes and not McInnes. The only sissy thing apparently about it, other than his habit of showing his bum or pooping in public, and the fact that he has some weird stories regarding if any of this is true, of course. However, I belong to the, I belong to the same 80s background that he did, just in a different country. So I don't doubt it. Like when punk shows, or hardcore shows, they were actually hardcore. Like the audience, for those who have never been in those places, they tend to spit at each other and punch each other just for the lols and stuff like that. So I understand where he's coming from. However, recently, he started that thing called the Proud Boys. That was a joke. It was a joke for those who do not know the beginnings of the Proud Boys. They were making fun of a Jewish kid that used to work for them, and apparently it was even that Jewish kid, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, that came with a suggestion, because Gavin was constantly, for the fun, just poking at him, as he usually does with everybody. They used to call him Rat, actually, because he kind of looked like one, so, you know, that has nothing to do with his ethnical background or anything of the sort. It was just a pun because he looked like that. Good old times when you could call people to show that you were being friendly towards them, that you did not wish them harm. You would actually insult them a bit, so they would roughen up and laugh it off, and you were giving them the opening to insulting you, to coming up with a witty statement against you. Like that I miss, because nowadays, although I still do it, I don't give a damn, but people are very up to on their toes about don't be that's the whole thing. Don't be up on your toes when you're talking with people. Be yourself. If they freak out, you stay away from them, because you know, okay, those ideologically contaminated, and they probably don't even know that they are ideologically And those are the times we're living. I lost a friend. A friend. We can debate. Friends you don't lose out of something silly. I lost someone who was about to work for me, or work with me rather, to work with me. Technicalities work for me, but could also be understood that would work for her. Uh, for a series of reasons. Before I explain those reasons, I need to get back to the Gavin thing. So he started the Proud Boys movement for fun, and their uniform was wearing a shirt from a specific trademark, from some specific um, designer, and that was it. And they would gather, and they would they would call cat, and they would do all those things that we used to do in the good old days. Oh, believe me, the 80s were great. Great music. You had much more liberty than you have today. It's just mind blowing what is going on. Like the sexual Diva was right. Diva was right. The sexual revolution is becoming like the evolution is becoming the devolution. It looks like it. We need to put a stop to that. The sexual revolution is becoming the sexual repression. People need to be ashamed of everything. Anyway, yeah, it's really like shame, shame. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and that needs to stop. Why? Because it harms us all. But anyway, he was doing the Proud Boy thing, and it was fun for the shits and giggles. And then they started to defend people who were talking on the behalf of freedom of speech, and that seemed to have attracted a lot of radicals from the left who were fighting them, like who just wanted to beat people in the streets. As I explained clearly, Gavin was an anarchist. Is, I believe. He plays the role of conservative, but he's pretty much an anarchist. He talks like one. Like he talks like we used to talk back in the 80s. He teases like one. He's pretty much one. We just grow old, and we get perhaps a better sense of fashion. And for those who giggle at ooh fashion, if you do not know, punk was a fashion, because punk, the real name punk, actually means like it's the cell bitch. It's the young kid that ends up in jail and ends up serving as the maiden, to put it in a nice way, um, for the cell that they are put into. You know, he becomes the woman of the cell. That's the original term for punk. When that movement arose, it was created by two designers. They created the term. They created the whole fashion. It was a fashion. It was a fashion statement from McLaren and a woman. She's actually very famous. I can't remember her name now, but however, she is very famous for actually doing dresses, kind of those dresses with a false bum. I really don't remember her name. Great designer actually. She's really good. Um, but yeah, it was a fashion. So if you smirk when I said, "Oh, we just got better at fashion with age," punk in itself is a fashion. It's a fashion statement. So started in the shop called Sex Pistols, like oh sex or pistols. So long ago. Anyway, then the band Sex Pistols, like they were hired by the shop as kind of a promo. They trained for 3 months and then off they went, and they became that thing that we know today. Like there was something previous to what we know as punk, but Iggy Pop and all that. However, if you want to know, punk is a fashion. Anarchism, however, is not. So, and Gavin, he is an anarchist. I can say he still is. However, you see, this whole Proud Boys, because back in the days, um, you used to be a part of in the 80s, a part of a group, a part of a gang, like that movie Warriors. Yeah, uh, you know, it had a reason to be made because the youth they were doing kind of that kind of stuff. The like we had the back in the 80s. If you really want to know, we have those who liked Wham, and a bit later on Duran Duran. Uh, and those are people like Macron and like those that nobody likes because they're just boring. And then we had the people who liked Ramones, who liked Sex Pistols, who liked Motorhead, like they a myriad of others that their records you wouldn't buy. Like you had to go to deeper ends to buy their records in the 80s. Like they didn't have it in every shop. We didn't have Spotify. We didn't have any of this. So like you were really cool if you could find certain records and then you would share with your friends. You would make pirate copies. Your friends would like it, and then you would make pirate copies. You would pick a pencil, and who knows what I'm doing knows what I'm talking about. Like those cassette tapes. You would instead, because the cassette players they were so slow to rewind, and that you needed to put a pencil, a big pen, uh, and you would roll it in the big pen, and it will go faster if you just put it in the. That was the level of hardware we had at hand back in those days. So it was a great time for discovery, really, and I think this was the fun aspect of it. Like if you really wanted to be cool, you really needed to get it out there. You needed to go out there. You needed to confront the beasts. Like I found a shop of uh, used books, and um, and they sold records. And in that shop, they had some very good records. And those who know me back from the day know more or less what I'm talking about. And I was one of the cool guys back then because I managed to find that shop on my own. Nobody told me. Like one day, because I love to walk, one day I just wandered about in the center of the city where it was most dangerous. I wanted to see, oh, is it really? What happened if I just walk into it? So I went there and I started roaming around and seeing the darn people like that lived there, and it was fascinating. Like for me, at least, at a young age. Though I'm not really the usual kid, like I wasn't. Um, at the age of 15, I traveled to another country by my own. So, but you know, you deserved the name back then. Today, you make stupid videos and you just become popular because people are so bored that they will take anything, literally anything. Plus, there's much more access to very young kids and children, so usually they become popular because in the eyes of those children, they are gods. So you doubt me? Well, check the Finger family in YouTube. See what's more popular. Like You don't have to be brilliant or cool or anything extraordinary nowadays to become a huge hit. Just saying. Grumpy old man complaining about. Well, anyway, uh, I get Gavin McInnes, but what I didn't get is because he was indeed. I'm not questioning that he was a part of some gang back in the days. If you were one of the cool kids, you were like either your school mates or people that you know from the streets, like form gangs, and you would declare a part of your neighborhood, if not the entire neighborhood, as your territory and all that kind of stuff. We had that. I'm not sure they have it nowadays. I'm about to find out in a couple of years with my kids. Uh, so there was a lot of physical reality going on. So it came to me as a shock, in a way, as a surprise, not a shock. I'm not like no, but as a surprise that the first, perhaps not the first, like he received a lot of flack and he was called a lot of stuff by the media and all that. Apparently, they just managed to crack him. It's natural, it's normal. Nobody's a superhuman. Uh, like I had certain trainings in my life, and I found out like all it takes for you to like, well, you can take the toughest son of a bitch that you know, and if you deprive them of sleep, or if you can make them worried enough or tired enough, they will crack to anything. Like there is no superhero in this world. So we're all humans, we're all animals, and nowadays, especially authorities, are pretty efficient to cracking people down, like because of all the studies that kind of started in the Soviet Union with like when Stalin decided to hire Pavlov, and that name rings bells. Who gets the pun? Um, hire Pavlov to study human interaction. And after that, several studies were made in the human psyche from both East and West, and there was a lot discovered about us. So I think they finally made him snap because he had this movement, and then he got the news that the movement had been infiltrated by people of the alt-right for realsies, not just the media talking about it hysterically to try to clickbait. However, because it attracted individuals of the right who, as back in the days, just wanted to beat up people. So now, as back in the days, the right and the left were beating each other. Like back in the days, it was really the anarchists against the communists and the police, and the skinheads against the anarchists and the communists and the police, and the headbangers, and there was also the rockabillys. So everybody was fighting everybody back in the days, and I think Gavin got a bit. It's good to be back when he started fighting Antifa, who are communists, by the way. Already made a video about it. Check it out. They are not anarchists. Kids are confused nowadays, if not ill-intended, especially those specific. That costed me somebody to work from me because I made that video that they are not. And I'm not sure in a way because everything was shit and giggles for apparently for Gavin. Um, and because he managed to pull it out so well in the last decades, I'm not sure that he understands the where we are historically. And he understood, and he probably under pressure he snapped. I'm not saying I would never do that. However, I personally conclude he should not have left the Proud Boys. He should have, instead of just disavowed and disassociated, he should have continued and kicked those guys out of his group. You see, that's the perk, but as an anarchist, he has some issues of him becoming authority himself, and I understand it, and I get it, and there are several aspects of anarchism that haven't been discussed, that we should have discussed. But here's the chance to actually start discussing it and enlightening it. Look, before I made this video, I made a run uh, in social network platforms to see how much the anarchist communities had anything to do with anarchism. And much to my dismay, they had been overrun by communists. However, much to my joy, once proper facts were enlightened and explained, like the kids who really wanted to be there because of anarchism, they didn't take my side because I don't have a group of followers now. But they're definitely not subscribed to my channel. But they realized what anarchism is, and then they did the rational thing. And this is why I believe in this generation. People criticize, but perhaps they criticize the millennials because they are afraid of their potential. Because I see potential in the millennials. I see them waking up to a reality. Because they know they will have to work to survive. Do you understand? I'm not sure they are alienated. They have been broken down and made confused, and sometimes, most of the times, even indoctrinated by the school systems. But once they are out of that poison that has become a poison, you barely learn anything useful in there anymore. You just learn to hate stuff and to blindly follow other stuff. Their goal is to get a job, is to be able to sustain themselves. And then they are out in the market, and then they realize that it's all broken. It's all corrupt to the core. And no matter what they do, they will have to pay a lot of money because the government decide to exploit people to the maximum. We have had a reality gap in the last 3 decades at least that I believe they will be able to close. I believe that the millennials, it might sound crazy for some, because people have this tendency of trash the other part so they don't need to be responsible about what they do wrong. But I see potential in those kids. They're clever, they're not dumb. The sole fact that some of them are very manipulative, and this whole thing that they use of hate speech and all that, that is being pounded by the boomers, and by boomers I mean the generation previous to mine, that I'm not a part of. I'm not a part of. Definitely not a part of. They are being confused because, however, they know pretty much how to use sentimental blackmail and all that. So they're not dumb, but they are wiser than the. It's so complicated. Do people even understand what I'm saying? Those things where I want to, and not because of them, because I've been like talking about decades, you know, before some of you were even born. Like, so in that sense, are you even aware of certain things? And not because I'm the epitome of high intellect, but because, you know, like it's like talking details about the lifestyle of life in the 1920s in the 20th century, in the early 20th century, when you weren't born there. So what the hell would you know about that? So what would I know about that? When my grandpa and my grandma used to tell me stuff about there, I couldn't even visualize that, and that has nothing to do with lack of intelligence, just lack of knowledge. Very different. Anyway, I have hope in the kids today, despite everybody being so skeptical and sarcastic about them. All they really need, it all boils down to they know they are going to need to work, and they know that they are going to need to work hard, and they will need to do anything to survive. That's the sad reality that we are actually leaving for the kids nowadays, and that should stop as well. We should be more responsible as adults to make a better society for those kids. And when Gavin McInnes, who has an opportunity of doing the right thing, decides to jump off the boat that he created himself, maybe a joke, maybe not, maybe ego, maybe narcissism, maybe whatever reasons it is. I'm not saying it is. I don't know. I don't know what goes on in his mind. Can you tell me with 100% certainty what goes on in his mind? I'm not even sure sometimes that he knows it himself. If you doubt me, ask him. Why? Because he's only human. God damn it. I think he had an opportunity to make a statement as an anarchist even. He had an opportunity to make a statement, and instead he fizzled out. And if he wants to use a figure of the 80s, you didn't step out, like you didn't fizzle out of something like that. Like if you had your little gang, your little group there, you would step in and make sure everything was in order and kick out the irresponsible, the real troublemakers, like the people, unreliable people you had in your group. I think it was an opportunity for him to actually shut up the media. They couldn't, they wouldn't be able to say anything bad about him if he had stepped up and said, I do not, instead of just I disavow, and I'm out of there. No, he should have stepped up and put a stop to it, a clear stop to it. No, you're not Proud Boys. No, no, you're not. No, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, these people, these groups, they are not. And I'm the guy who created this whole shebang here, and I'm saying that they are not. So hey, talk about a kind of empirical evidence. I think that's pretty much solid. Instead, what the media will take it as, aha, see, now, if not before, now the Proud Boys are officially right wing, because the anarchists, and I'm not saying anarchists are left wing, but debatable. We can make a video and a discussion about that. Anarchists are technically, free from all this nonsense. It is nonsense. It's just to create this kind of propaganda, like they made research about that, and they could prove that 3 to 5% of people are either truly what can be considered as left and truly what can be considered as right. And so basically 90% of the people would be defined as center. And also, I'm going to make a video about that just after this one. So to be brief, because of all this, Gavin should not have stepped out of the Proud Boys, even if it was a joke, just for the sake of clarification that he never had the intention of letting the Proud Boys become something more than a joke, if that's the argument. Because as it did right now, like the movement is probably going to dissolve, but if it doesn't, it's going to become a new um, st- stepstone for a radical movement. He shouldn't have backed away. That's my personal view about it. I told you, or hopefully you could fathom a bit of it, what I meant by all this. And it's very clear, especially if you use it, oh, but back in the 80s this and back in the 80s that. Well, back in the 80s, if you had a problem with some members of your group, gang, whatever you want to call it, you would call them out and kick out the bullshit. And if you needed to have a physical fight with your members to do that, you would have a physical fight with your members to get rid of the bad ones. But they were not welcome. That's how it used to be. And I've been in several of those groups when I was a kid. You know, I know what I'm talking about. Not the criminal type, like that was previous. You know, it was really a group of kids that were bored to death and had absolutely nothing to do back in the 80s because everything was just so dull and boring. You understand that we felt the urge of walking in the dangerous parts of town to try to find something new because everything else was so dull and boring. I mean, Wham and later on Duran Duran. Imagine that. And that was all you had in the pop radio back in the days. Wham! You know, completely insipid, unrealistic uh, entertainment. Like wealth, 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 rich, rich. You know, the majority of people are not rich. So, Gavin, if you ever touches that with a stick, you shouldn't have backed out. And if you had a chance, I think you should have returned to that just to kick those guys out, even if you leave it afterwards. But just to make a clear statement, because now the media will just say, aha! You know? Now they are officially. The leader who was kind of me, that we were just trashing to get clickbaits mainly, had stepped out of it. So they are officially now it. Again, I believe it will dissolve by itself. However, if it doesn't, then a new stepstone to an ideologically driven from a failed ideology. It is a failed ideology. You know, it failed faster than communism. If you manage to fail faster than communism as an ideology, you shouldn't be. Even based in what the leadership, the inspiring figures of your ideology had to say when, for instance, they criticized pagan religions. Their criticism was that, well, they ceased to be in power, so let them go. Don't bring back things that were removed from power into power. So there's a whole argumentation from those leaders that things like that shouldn't be returned, shouldn't come back. So that ideology failed and it shouldn't come back. And I'm not mentioning which ideology, I'm mentioning all the ideologies that have failed and shouldn't come back based in the logic of this specific ideology, based in the arguments of the leaders of those specific ideologies. They shouldn't be returning themselves because they've proven to be highly inefficient. I mean, they destroyed the entire continent and gave like and became from the seat of empires, became officially like colonies from Russia and the United States. Definitely not what I would call a successful movement, is it? You manage to destroy, to be so bad that you destroy your entire continent and you become everyone else's bitch, literally. To use words that people understand nowadays, you became literally everyone else's bitch and had to apologize like a little bitch all the time. Now, I'm not calling people personally today bitches, but I'm just pointing out the consequence of that specific ideology that now allegedly has taken over the movement of the Proud Boys. That, debatable, fun or not fun, whatever, by the leave of Gavin, and disavowalment has officially become an instrument of a certain ideology. At the end of the day, I don't personally care about what happens with them. They would just go on totters against each other, against Antifa. Well done there. Kids back to the 80s in terms of behaviorism. Like you would be uh, beating each other up before you found a good love and care. That's what you would be doing. All this testosterone needs to go somewhere. I mean, just to waste it in porn. I mean, it's so sad. No, build up your muscles. Go knocking each other. It's healthy. Don't use guns. Solve it in a man-to-man kind of way. It is fun. Gave me a lot of memories because I kind of survived to tell. Gave me a lot of memories to tell to people who won't give a. You know what I did when I was your age? Ah, Grandpa, here comes annoying Grandpa again. What the hell? I'm just getting ready for 20 years from now. Or 30. So, Gavin, you shouldn't have done this. You should have stick to it a little bit more. Even if you would leave afterwards. Just to make sure that those kids were out of your joke, and the media couldn't really say anything. After then, once this is solved, then you stepped out of it, then fair enough. Whatever happened afterwards, you cannot be blamed for, right? So, Gavin, bad Gavin, bad Gavin, bad, bad. Anyway, and this is from a guy who also lived in the 80s and also used to do the kind of stuff that you used to do, okay? So take it from a friend. I mean it in the best way possible. Been there, done that. I know what I'm talking about. You should have stayed and settled the matter as it should have. As we would do back in the days if you had to use that as an argument. That's it.